Knockoffs exist everywhere, from clothing brands to various types of technology and food. They arise because people recognize the popularity of a particular product, and even if they inevitably make a worse product, they still have the opportunity to at least acquire a piece of the pie. There are a multitude of different knockoffs you potentially are completely unaware about. For instance, Oreos. This phenomenon is prevalent in the gaming industry as well. Game development is challenging, as it involves multiple components in addition to relying on innovation. Therefore, it's significantly easier to create a near identical game and hope people find it interesting, as it resembles something they already find entertaining. However, while not as commonplace, there are certain cases where developers utilize an existing idea and create an amazing game that surpasses the original. This is how we end up with knockoff games that are much better than the originals, needless to know becoming unparalleled in that particular game archetype. To illustrate these occurrences, let's discuss 3 separate instances. For starters, a perfect example of this is Geometry Dash, the hectic 2D rhythm-based platformer with changing colors, in addition to various obstacles scattered throughout the level. Despite its seemingly unique gameplay, Geometry Dash was heavily inspired by a game called The Impossible Game. It was released on November 23, 2009. The gameplay is similar to Geometry Dash to the point that it's difficult to differentiate between the 2 games. The Impossible Game was initially launched to a unique portion of people, with it debuting as an Xbox Live indie game. This was a feature that allowed players to download indie titles through the Xbox Live subscription service on the Xbox 360. It provided small developers exposure and players access to a variety of games. The game was successful enough on the Xbox to warrant a mobile release for the cost of only $1, becoming one of the most popular mobile games at the time. People were fascinated with its distinct platforming and mechanics, which all contributed to its difficulty. While the levels may appear straightforward now, especially if you play the plethora of user-created levels available in Geometry Dash, it was considered extremely challenging back then. The music also complemented the gameplay well, and the concept itself was unique. A side-scrolling platformer requiring precise jumps, with failure meant starting over. Due to the Impossible Game's success, Geometry Dash began development in 2013 by RobTop. After approximately 4 months, it was released on August 13, 2013 on iOS and Android devices. 1 month later, Geometry Dash Lite launched, promoted the game by offering a portion of other levels. This was a smart strategy, as nearly all mobile games are free, so it provided the opportunity for people to try the game, then buy it later if they found it was worth the purchase. Geometry Dash was significantly more creative than its predecessor, with greater amounts of complex platforming, better designed levels, and themes that changed throughout each stage, enhancing player immersion. These levels benefited from the mechanics like flying in a tiny rocket ship, as well as gravity flipping to partake in the difficult platforming upside down. As new levels were introduced, a fresh mechanic that corresponded to the level was introduced as well. These added mechanics in combination with the older ones synergized well together. Besides the new mechanics, what's easily the most important feature that contributed to Geometry Dash's lasting success is the level editor. Ambitiously, it launched with this tool, which was a brilliant move by RobTop, ensuring the game's longevity. The editor included all the blocks, spikes, and special features from the levels. It was even continuously updated with new mechanics whenever new levels were added, keeping the game original. The possibilities were endless with this level editor, all culminating in players crafting levels that were much harder than the ones present in the base game. Considering RobTop games is run solely by one person, this allowed the game to thrive despite a limited number of official levels. Initially, there were only 7 levels, each more unique than the ones seen in the Impossible Game. Moreover, to further emphasize the creative aspects, players had customization options for the cube. These required particular tasks to complete. For example, Cube 16, which is titled Cycles, required to complete a level called Cycles. There are a multitude of other options, providing players a chance to work towards appealing cosmetics. Due to its launch popularity, Geometry Dash progressively evolved with new levels being gradually added, each one increasing in difficulty. Furthermore, as mentioned previously, they introduced new mechanics. These updates were frequent initially, helping build a substantial content base in combination with the level editor. However, following a 1.9 patch on November 9, 2014, which added 2 brand new levels, Blast Processing and Theory of Everything 2, updates became much less consistent. The upcoming patch was 2.0, which didn't arrive until 6 months later on August 26, 2015. To offset this, it was a massive content update, launching 2 new levels, called Geometrical Dominator and Deadlocked. Additionally, it resembled the other updates, with plenty of new features and skins for the various forms. Within 6 months was already lengthy, but the 2.1 patch took even longer, with an approximate 1.5 year delay before finally launching on January 16, 2017. This time, the only level added was Finger Dash, a fire and lava themed level. It possesses a spider transformation that goes instantly to the platform above or below, depending on your current position. While Finger Dash is enjoyable, it indicated a shift in approach, as it wasn't the same amount of content that players were accustomed to previously. Furthermore, it was relatively straightforward in comparison to other levels such as Electrodynamics, with its insanely fast speed alongside difficult flying sections. This similarly applies to other recent levels. For example, blast processing was labeled as a hard level, and most of its jumps heavily correspond to that difficulty. However, despite it being sensible to assume this trend to be a concern, the player-created levels will always be harder. Thus, the standard levels are a simple but entertaining experience that help creators continue making more intriguing levels. The most recent major update, 2.2, took almost 7 years to release, meaning the majority of the game's 12-year lifespan has zero content being added. The patch finally arrived on December 20th, 2023. This particular patch was heavily anticipated, following it being delayed multiple times, but delivered the biggest update in Geometry Dash history. Most notably, it introduced a tower mode, where the game officially became a traditional platformer, allowing players to move to the right as opposed to automatically side-scrolling. There were bosses with great animations, and it was overall a great addition to the game. The patch introduced numerous new mechanics and improvements, drawing players back to the game. Now with the 2.21 patch still pending, that will bring long-delayed content like PvP, it's clear that updates have become increasingly infrequent. This raises an important question. How has Geometry Dash managed to outlast its competitors despite these delays? Well, once the game had a solid foundation with various mechanics, Rob Todd didn't need to keep adding new levels. He could rely on the community to utilize the tools he provided to create harder and more creative levels. As long as the game received some support, it was far from a necessity to have constant updates like when it first launched. Geometry Dash easily surpassed the Impossible game in quality and revenue, largely thanks to its community. Now that we have seen the success of Geometry Dash, you're probably wondering what happened with the Impossible game. Well, there's little information to discuss because it received zero updates after its initial launch. This proportionately led to eventual boredom from the player base, especially since it lacked a level editor. While the Impossible game eventually came to Steam, gaining some success through sales and popular YouTubers covering it, Rob Todd decided to bring Geometry Dash to Steam as well. Now the game looked much better and played at a high FPS, making it more enjoyable. Despite being inspired by another title, Rob Todd put much more effort into creating a superior game. He utilized the concept and crafted one of the most successful games with infinite replayability. Today, Geometry Dash remains popular on Steam, boasting a peak player count of 22,000 through the recent months, and an average of just under 14,000. The 2.2 update showcased a substantial interest still in the game, as it was up to 88,000 players. Thus, it had an immensely dedicated community that had been consistently playing for the last 12 years. In contrast, the Impossible game has faded away, with no new content and regularly having zero active players on Steam. And Impossible Game 2 was released on March 22nd, 2022, in an attempt to compete with Geometry Dash. The game introduced creative power-ups like jetpacks, a ninja mode, and a 3-stack mode. Alongside this was unique mechanics to the game, as it also included multiplayer features and cube customization. Finally, to aid its survivability, it included a level editor, a feature that helped Geometry Dash surpass its predecessor. Despite the effort put into it, the sequel failed to gain traction. It only has 400 ratings on the App Store, and its player count on Steam is currently 0, similar to the first game. It's simple to understand why the sequel was a complete failure. Firstly, it lacked promotion across different platforms, so even if you were previously a fan 10 plus years earlier, you were presumably unaware of its release. Additionally, most potential players were already invested in Geometry Dash and its updates. It's difficult for a game to become popular in a genre that's already dominated, especially for more niche categories. Now that the Impossible Game 2 hasn't received any updates in a year, the sequel seems to have been abandoned, making Geometry Dash the clear victor for a second time. Geometry Dash only continues to thrive and will remain popular for years to come. Now, let's transition to another game that began as a knockoff but evolved into a massive success. Stardew Valley. Over time, it has become one of the most iconic and beloved cozy games in the genre. It's available on all major platforms and is a game that people have spent countless hours playing. However, as Stardew Valley has become the face of the cozy genre, many people don't realize that it drew heavy inspiration from an older game, Harvest Moon. So let's discuss where it all began. and how Stardew Valley eventually surpassed its predecessor. The first Harvest Moon game was released on August 9, 1996 for the SNES, being developed by Victor Interactive Software. It was a farm simulation game with much resemblance to what you see today in Stardew Valley, and the numerous other titles attempted to replicate a fraction of its success. The original Harvest Moon did extremely well, selling 100,000 units, and was well liked enough to spawn an entire series. Following this game, the developers produced a remarkable 26 games over 16 years, spread across Nintendo's handheld and home consoles, including the GameCube, DS, and Wii. Each game featured its own story and quests, along with the usual cozy gameplay that offered farming and management. The series focused heavily on seasons, which each season affected various aspects like crop growth. For instance, players could only grow certain crops in specific seasons, and planting out of season would result in crop failure. This mechanic, popularized by Harvest Moon, is a staple in cozy games like Stardew Valley, and is an excellent feature for simulation games. The final game before Harvest Moon underwent a name change was Harvest Moon 3D, A New Beginning. It was well received by longtime fans of the series and laid out the groundwork for future titles. However, it ended up being the last game of the original Harvest Moon series due to a shift in publication rights. The story behind this change is certainly confusing, so bear with me. Victor Interactive developed the first Harvest Moon and all the subsequent titles leading up to A New Beginning. In 2003, Marvelous, another Japanese game company, merged with Victor Interactive, bringing all its properties under one name. Victor Interactive had previously published the titles under the title Red Story in Japan, with Natsume handling North American localization and renaming the series Harvest Moon. When Marvelous decided to have Xseed, another subsidiary, publish the games in North America, the Harvest Moon name remained with Natsume. Although they were originally just a publisher, Natsume decided to continue creating games under the Harvest Moon name, which is why the series is still being released today. Meanwhile, Xseed began publishing games under the name Story of Seasons. This resulted in two different franchises emerging from the same original series, making it one of the strangest cases of rights division in gaming history. Following the rebranding, Story of Seasons continued in the vein of the original Harvest Moon series, while Harvest Moon titles were now being developed by Natsume. The first Story of Seasons game under this new arrangement was released on the 3DS in 2014, receiving mostly positive reviews due to it capitalizing on the franchise's strong points. The game sold extremely well in both Japan and North America, becoming the top-selling game in March 2014 for Japan at 131,000 units sold. For North America, it rapidly sold 100,000 copies in 4 months. In contrast, the first Harvest Moon game was called The Lost Valley. It was significantly different from what people had become accustomed to, as it allowed for more creativity in designing your village. This new format was terribly reviewed, making it a horrendous beginning for those games. Following Lost Valley, Natsume launched a mobile game in 2016, featuring great art and nostalgic vibes for longtime fans of the series. However, due to its simplicity, it failed at gaining much attention. This finally brings us to the release of Stardew Valley. So, let's analyze how Stardew Valley rose to dominate the cozy game genre and surpass such a well-established series. Before discussing its release and subsequent popularity, it's important to mention the development process. The creator began developing Stardew Valley in 2012, working independently on all aspects of the game, including animation, music, and programming. This was an incredibly strenuous task, with him reportedly working 10 hours a day for 4 years to get the game launched. This dedication places Stardew Valley on a short list of solo-developed games that achieved significant recognition. The game was eventually released for Steam on February 26, 2016, and all concerned its hard work paid off. Stardew Valley was an immediate success, with March 2016 seeing a peak player count of 65,000, making it one of the most played games on Steam that month, already competing with the popularity of the Harvest Moon series. If you compare the gameplay, Stardew Valley closely resembles its predecessor, with the creator citing Harvest Moon as his main inspiration. However, Stardew Valley became a much bigger and better game for several reasons. Firstly, in comparison to Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley upholds its popularity as a single game that continues to receive updates even after 9 years. These updates have introduced new features like marriages, multiplayer options, additional cutscenes, and various new crops, ensuring that players can enjoy the game for years to come. Another key factor was platform availability. Up to this point, Harvest Moon had been exclusively released on Nintendo consoles, limiting its player base. Stardew Valley, however, launched on Steam, making it accessible to a wider audience. Its low system requirements also meant it could be run on basic laptops, further expanding its reach. Due to its massive success, the game eventually expanded to all platforms, providing it a massive advantage. The art style of Stardew Valley also helps it stand out. The visuals are stunning, especially considering they were created by a single person. The game looks far better than both the 2D and 3D iterations of Harvest Moon. Additionally, despite not being story driven, Stardew Valley includes an engaging narrative where players will build Pelican Town. This storyline helps guide players toward their goals, adding depth to the experience, which is great for a game of this genre. Moreover, the game's affordability adds to its appeal. Priced at just $15, Stardew Valley offers infinite replayability. It frequently goes on sale for 30 to 50% off during seasonal promotions on Steam. It's a perfect representation of what a cozy game should be, combining depth, charm, and value in a way that keeps players returning to the game. Across all platforms, Stardew Valley has sold over 40 million copies, greatly surpassing the Harvest Moon franchise. Its popularity is apparent, with an average of over 60,000 players on Steam alone. Since the release of the 1.6 update in March 2024, which introduced a mastery system and more resources, the game has seen a significant surge in players, peaking at an impressive 240,000 during that period. This is in addition to the average counts doubling. These updates, alongside a great base game, has solidified Stardew Valley as one of the most iconic, indie, and cozy games ever released. Given this sensational success, you're probably wondering what happened to the Harvest Moon series and its rebranded counterpart, Story of the Season. Well, as Stardew Valley continued to rise to prominence, Story of the Season released another game in 2016 called Story of the Season's Trio Town. While the sales weren't terrible, they were down for previous 3DS games. Overall though, the title received solid ratings and was a great second entry under the new name. The next release came in 2019 with Friends of Mineral Town, marking the first time the series launched on all major platforms. It was a remake of an older Harvest Moon game and was well received by longtime fans, eventually surpassing 1 million sales, which is an impressive achievement for a smaller title. The following game, Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town, also launched on all major platforms, but received mixed reviews compared to Friends of Mineral Town. Despite this, it sold well, similarly surpassing 1 million units and becoming the 98th best-selling Switch game ever. The most recent release, Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life, is a remake of one of the most beloved entries in the series. However, it received criticism for lacking the extensive story and quests found in newer farming games, leading to lower than expected sales. Despite a disappointing launch for A Wonderful Life, the Story of Season series has steadily gained popularity since rebranding, and continues to do well, even if it hasn't reached the same heights of other cozy games like Animal Crossing New Horizons or Stardew Valley. In comparison, the Harvest Moon series has seen 5 more games released on all major platforms. The latest of these games is Harvest Moon: The Wind of Anthos, but it wasn't well received. Fans of the original Harvest Moon games generally dislike the not-so redeveloped titles, as they don't capture the same excitement and generally play very differently. While sale numbers are difficult to locate, all the games were particularly popular, with Winds of the Anthos' highest record player count being a measly 347. Overall, Story of Seasons is doing better than the Harvest Moon series, seemingly because it retains developers who have been working on a game for nearly 30 years. None of these newer games from the Harvest Moon and Story of Season franchises were awful, but they simply couldn't compare to the massive success of Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley popularized the cozy farming genre, despite its origins as a knockoff. Similar to Geometry Dash, Stardew Valley managed to surpass the original and become a defining title in its genre. The final game is Fortnite, and it's not as blatant as the previous titles, but it sparked a massive debate back in 2018 when Battle Royales exploded in popularity. Fortnite was the most popular game, and you couldn't go anywhere without someone mentioning it. It has slowed down in recent years, but it's still consistently one of the most played games out there. It was originally a zombie shooter game, but it created a Battle Royale game mode to capitalize on the success of them. It was clear that Fortnite took inspiration from PUBG and H1Z1, which helped it surpass both in popularity. Even now, it remains a more widely discussed game. To highlight what happened, let's go back to 2015, when H1Z1 was released. I couldn't find the exact launch player counts, but in 2016, the game maintained a steady player count of around 14,000. People enjoyed the game due to the Battle Royale and third-person mechanics it combined. Throughout 2016, its player count saw a substantial increase, eventually peaking at 40,000 in December 2016. This demonstrates that the Battle Royale genre is starting to gain popularity right before 2017 and 18. H1Z1 was one of the main reasons for that. As months went on, H1Z1 continued to gain players, and in March 2017, PUBG came out. The game was set up for success, with its battle royale features, in addition to having developers that worked on H1Z1. It started off somewhat slow, with an average of 17,000 players, which wasn't bad, but still trailed behind H1Z1. However, in the coming months, it became one of the most played games of all time, possessing 1 million players by October, and that will only continue to rise. PUBG was well received and gained its massive player base largely because its gunplay was superior to H1Z1. Moreover, it had a simplistic nature to it. While PUBG established itself as the best battle royale game, H1Z1 started declining following July 2017. Players presumably began transitioning to PUBG, and they were on the verge of moving to a new game that would soon dominate gaming. For Fortnite, Save the World had moderate success, but it wasn't as selling. The Epic Games saw the massive rise of the battle royale genre and decided to start working on their own battle royale game, hoping to combine the Save the World's redeeming qualities. On September 26, 2017, the battle royale game mode launched. It has similar mechanics to its competition, involving collecting the best loot possible and finishing as the last one standing. However, the building system carried over from Save the World would completely set Fortnite apart from the other battle royale games and ultimately help it become one of the most popular games of all time. This building system allowed players to build walls, stairs, floors, and cones as long as you had the materials required. In comparison to PUBG and H1Z1, which were mostly about gunplay, it created a unique experience, making it more entertaining and replayable. Nevertheless, unlike PUBG, Fortnite wasn't an instant success. It definitely had a dedicated fan base, but it seemed like it wouldn't reach the same heights as PUBG. Over time, more streamers began playing it, and people started to recognize its greatness due to its distinct gameplay. By late 2017, it already had a player count in the millions, surpassing even PUBG. It continued to grow, and with the release of the mobile version, its popularity surged even further. By summer of 2018, it was undoubtedly the most played game. While exact numbers are difficult to find due to how long ago this was, Fortnite dominated Twitch, boasting double the watch hours of any other game. It also peaked with 250,000 more viewers than PUBG, which held second place. So, what happened? How did Fortnite manage to completely surpass its competitors? As we discussed previously, building was the biggest factor. Additionally, the cartoony style graphics were more aesthetically pleasing to more players, as it reminded them of other popular games like League of Legends and Overwatch. The graphics in PUBG and H1Z1 were still appealing, but the realistic style typically does worse for live service games. To coincide with the cartoony graphics, Fortnite was an overall less serious game. This was noticeable from Epic adding amusing weapons, items, and events. For example, to match the release of Avengers Infinity War, an event allowed players to play as Thanos. For items, the guided missile launcher and jetpacks were introduced to keep the gameplay exciting. As mentioned before, PUBG and H1Z1 resemble typical shooter games, without anything particularly stand out. To further emphasize Fortnite's more lighthearted approach, the skins were vibrant, creative, and distinct. This added more personality to the game, which led to it differentiate itself even more. Finally, the updates were more frequent than the other games. This added variety kept the gameplay fresh and prevented it from becoming repetitive too quickly. Fortnite continued its dominance into 2019 by consistently releasing content. Similar to Fortnite, PUBG also continued to rise, reaching its peak of 3.2 million players on Steam in 2018. It decreased from there, but it still had hundreds of thousands of players playing. During this time period, PUBG attempted to soup Epic Games for having similar gameplay features, but it was eventually dropped. This didn't reflect well on PUBG, as although Fortnite initially took heavy inspiration from it, the game gradually became its own unique experience. It seemed like PUBG was reacting to Fortnite's growing success, and their response was to file a lawsuit. In contrast to Fortnite and PUBG, H1Z1 commenced a massive decline in 2018, and it was outclassed by its competition. By the end of 2018, it was only averaging 2,000 players, which is just a fraction of what it was just 1 year ago. Now that another 6 years have passed, let's review the current state. Starting with H1Z1, which was later rebranded as Z1 Battle Royale, the game now barely averages 800 players, with most people having long forgotten the title that helped launch the Battle Royale genre. Not only has the game become basic, but the genre itself has also declined since its peak in 2018, further diminishing its appeal. On the other hand, PUBG is currently doing extremely well. On Steam alone, it has an average of 300,000 players, and has a peak of around 800,000. While the game is no longer widely discussed, it still maintains a significant player base. As long as it continues to receive updates, it's likely to retain its dominance in the genre. This situation highlights a unique case but two knockoffs ended up becoming more popular than the original, as two games that were inspired by H1Z1, Surpassed and Success. Regarding Fortnite, it's not as popular as 2018, but contrary to popular belief, it still possesses an active player base. Fortunately, Fortnite showcases its player count, thus providing an accurate depiction of concurrent players. Scattered across the different game modes, it has an average player count of 1.5 million, and recently peaked at over 4 million. The majority of people criticize Fortnite for various reasons, but there's no denying it still has a massive player base. Typically, releasing a game after multiple established titles have already dominated the genre is not a successful strategy. However, Fortnite's swift development and unique building mechanic allowed it to transcend both competitors. The phenomenon of knockoff surpassing the original is uncommon, as imitators often struggle to achieve the same level of success. In these cases though, dedicated developers and consistent updates allow these games to evolve, distinguishing themselves from their inspirations and ultimately surpassing them in quality. This raises the question of whether similar success stories will emerge in the future and how developers will continue to innovate to outperform their predecessors. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.